So pleased now to be joined by Paul Bretl to talk a little bit about what's going on with the Green Bay Packers. Dairyland Express, Cheesehead TV. I've seen your stuff connected to Fansided as well. And thanks for being with us on Sports Not. Welcome.
Yeah, Carolyn, thanks you for having me. I greatly appreciate it. And there's a lot going on with the Green Bay Packers this
Oh,
time
yeah,
of
you
year.
said it. You said it. I mean, a lot of people were kind of scratching their heads after their last loss, of course, and we'll get into that a little bit. But you wrote something recently about the salary cap, how it's really tight for the team. So where do you expect roster changes coming as it relates to next season? How do you anticipate the Packers will handle the restrictions that they have with the salary cap?
Yeah, so right now they're over the cap has Green Bay at about $40 million over, and I think that's the second worst in the NFL or close to it. And that's not even all of it, because that figure doesn't bake in the 52nd, 53rd players on the roster, the practice squad, the draft class, any re-signings, any new additions, any reserves for in-season spending. So they're going to need to clear far more than just that $40 million. And there's ways to do it, and they'll be able to keep who they want to keep. I know it's tight and Packer fans are particularly focused on it, but if Green Bay wants to bring back Devante Adams, they can. It's just, we need to keep in mind there's a trade-off. If Devante Adams is back, who's not getting re-signed? Is it Devondre Campbell, Rasul Douglas? Who's getting cut? Is it Zadarius Smith, Preston Smith? What contracts have to be reworked? So I think it's important to keep in mind that if Green Bay wants to bring someone back, they can, but there's going to have to be counter moves to be able to fit them under the salary cap. And there's a lot of guys that could be gone from this team. Zadarius Smith, Preston Smith, Adrian Amos, Billy Turner, Devante Adams. I mean, we don't know what the future holds for Aaron Rodgers. There's a lot, not saying all those guys are going to be gone. Some of them are going to be back, of course, but there's just a lot of unknown and a lot of potential turnover that can take place.
What kind of clues does this offer about which positions the organization prioritizes? You mentioned Campbell. They typically, I know you wrote that they haven't spent a lot of money at that position in the past. I mean, depending on who stays and who goes, outside of just the quality of the player themselves, I mean, does that offer a clue into how the organization is thinking and who they prioritize in terms of position?
Yeah, it absolutely could. As you mentioned, I wrote an article. Inside linebacker is not a position that Green Bay typically invests a lot in, whether that's dollars or draft picks. And Devondre Campbell's even an example of that. They signed him to a 1-year, $2 million deal in June. He just played incredible this year for them. But some of the like edge rusher is a premier position. I think it's pretty safe to say that Zadarius Smith isn't going to be back. He already posted on his Instagram kind of a thank you, farewell to Green Bay. And with his cap hit coming off of a season where he missed most of it due to a back injury, he could absolutely be a cap casualty. Billy Turner along the offensive line is another name to keep our eyes on, but that's a position that Green Bay typically focuses on and invests on, as they should. And then Preston Smith at edge rusher, he's either going to be released or he's going to receive an extension. And that's the thing with a lot of these guys. That's kind of where the option falls, because their cap hit this particular season is so large. So for Green Bay to get under, they either have to release them to clear some cap space, or they're going to have to extend them. And that allows them to take some of the cap hit from 2022 and spread it out over the life of the contract.
Yeah, for Packers fans that are hitting the panic button or don't have a true understanding of how you can sort of finesse the cap and get creative like the team has done in the past, I mean, what's the easiest layman's term way to explain how they're able to manipulate the system to a certain extent to make sure that they can, in fact, keep players that they want to keep?
Yeah, absolutely. So David Bakhtiari, Kenny Clark, Aaron Jones, they're all restructure candidates, which there's a couple of ways to go about this. But in short, you take a portion of the base salary, and the base salary cap hit is all in that season. So if I have a $10 million base salary, that's part of the cap hit, all $10 million. But you can take a portion of that, convert it to a signing bonus, and spread that out over the life of the contract. So if I took $8 million of that, made it a signing bonus, and I have 4 years left, I can go $2 million, $2 million, $2 million, $2 million, rather than absorbing that over the course of the season. So that's, in short, how a restructure works. And of course, all this is far more complicated than what we're diving into. But David Bakhtiari, Kenny Clark, Aaron Jones fall into that category. Then there's cut candidates. If of players, and these are going to be veteran players, if a veteran player's cap hit, that's money that's on the books if they're on the team, is larger than their dead cap hit. That's money that's going to be on the books if they're not on the team. So that's money that's already been paid out. You can't just magically make it go away. It still has to hit the books. Then you're going to have savings. So if my cap hits 10 million, my dead cap's 5 million, the team can save $5 million by moving on for me. So players like Zadarius Smith, Preston Smith, Adrian Amos, Billy Turner, Dean Lowry, Mason Crosby, Randall Cobb, they all fit into those categories as well. So those are names to keep our eyes on. And those are really, and then the extension, Aaron Rodgers, he's a prime extension candidate because his cap hit this year is $46 million. He's not going to play in Green Bay on the $46 million cap hit. He's either getting traded or they're going to give him an extension. You know what that does? It just, like it says, adds years to the contract. You can then convert base salary to signing bonus, spread it out over the life of the deal rather than absorbing that cap hit in just one season. So those are some of the names to keep our eyes on. And I also forgot to mention under that restructure category, you can put Jair Alexander in there as well. So there's certainly plenty of ways out there that Green Bay's can utilize to get under the cap space. I mean, they have to, they don't have a choice, but there's options out there. And some of these moves are going to clear significant chunks. But again, going back to what we started talking about originally, it's give and take. If Devante Adams is back and he's the highest paid receiver in football, who's getting cut in return? Who's not getting re-signed? If Devante Adams isn't back, then can you sign both Rasul Douglas, Devondre Campbell? Can you keep Preston Smith and extend them? So that's the balance. That's the give and take that Brian Gutekunst and Russ Ball are going to be dealing with all offseason.
But you think Devante Adams is coming back?
I think I do, because I think ultimately, and we're jumping ahead here, but I do think that Rodgers is going to come back. And I do think that those two are tied together. Aaron Rodgers has, we know he's praised Devante Adams, and rightfully so, but this season he called Devante Adams the best player he's ever played with. And that's a high honor that previously belonged to Charles Woodson. And we all know the connection that those two have on the field, but also off. They're very close friends. So again, this is all just speculation on my part, but I feel like what's going to happen with those two is going to be tied.
They say don't bury the lead in this business, right? So I apologize that we had you into the program and then I had you explain the nuances of the salary cap with the first couple of minutes that we had.
Absolutely.
But the headline is Aaron Rodgers. And right now, obviously, all the rumors are swirling around Denver. I know you just said you expect him to remain in Green Bay. So what do you make of what the next couple of months are going to look like and the possibility that he could potentially head to Denver?
Yeah, and I'll preface by saying, that's my guess, and that's all it is. And it changes daily. It's changed daily for 6 months. And, if you were to tell me he retired, there'd be part of me that goes, you know what, I could see it, even though I think that's the least likely of the three options. If you said he's traded to Denver, I would see that as well. And if he stays, obviously I can see that happening too. But the trade to Denver and why Denver's such a hot prospect for him as a place to end up is obviously there's a connection with Nathaniel Hackett now. He's raved about Hackett for the last couple of years and working with him, his football mind, but also just his demeanor and how he carries himself. But also Denver, they're one of the few teams that has the capital, the draft capital, to pony up what a trade for Aaron Rodgers would be worth, because we've never seen anything like this where the back-to-back or presumably back-to-back league MVP could be on the move via trade. So what those trade packages would look like, I know I'm not going to take a guess at putting one together, but I know we've seen a lot of examples of them out there. And, is it too rich? 3 first rounders, a couple seconds, and a player? Like, maybe, but that's the thing. We just don't know. But I certainly think that that's still in play. But ultimately, I think, as I mentioned, he's coming back. And I think one reason in particular is we know Rodgers is incredibly, incredibly competitive. He wants to win. And going to the AFC West, facing Pat Mahomes twice a year, Justin Herbert twice a year. I know Derek Carr takes a little bit of flack, but that was a playoff team. And then in the rest of the AFC, Joe Burrow, he's not going anywhere. Josh Allen, he's not going anywhere. And there's the Vikings and Bears, they're undergoing new management, GM, head coach coming in. We don't know what they're going to look like moving forward. The Lions are still a work in progress. But Man, if you asked anyone where would you rather play in as a chance to go, to win the division, you'd rather play in the NFC North just because it's weaker. So in terms of getting to the Super Bowl, heading out west to Denver, it's going to be, I just feel it's going to be a lot tougher path, both in the division, but also the quarterbacks that you have to go through compared to the NFC.
I feel like moving him anywhere kind of shakes the foundation of the league when you look at the different divisions and where he could end up. But from what you know about him, what you're basically saying is that when it comes to deciding between finding a team that can continue to get him paid, finding a team where he really respects and admires the coaching staff and feels like he'll have a lot of control over decision making, and finding a team or remaining with a team where he theoretically has the easiest path to advance to another Super Bowl, it's the latter for him, from what you know about him in terms of what is on his priority list and what's at the top.
Yeah, and I do not know Aaron Rodgers at all. I'm just speculating here and thinking out loud about what some of the reasons could be why he maybe doesn't want to go to Denver. And to me, that's a big one. I don't know if that's on his radar. We all know that athletes love a good challenge, and that absolutely would be. But in me just thinking out loud, I would have to think that would be certainly something that he's taking into consideration.
Let's talk a little bit about, and don't worry, Paul, this is all speculative, so we're not going to to call up the Packers organization and try to get you in trouble or anything like that. I mean, it's very difficult for anybody on the outside to read his mind and know what he's doing and know what moves are being made in the offseason. So with that fully understood, the coaching staff, the Packers coaching staff, is also going to, go through some growing pains here, it seems like, and some change as well in addition to the roster. So can you outline sort of what you predict for the coaching staff and what might be relevant to a diehard Packers fan who's watching this, who's really kind of observing all the changes from afar?
Yeah, absolutely. So Nathaniel Hackett was the offensive coordinator. Obviously, he's in Denver. So Green Bay's going to have to hire there. And Matt LaFleur said pretty definitively that they're going to look in-house for that. And the two names are Luke Getsy, who is the quarterback's coach and passing game coordinator, and then Adam Stenavich, who's done just an amazing job as the offensive line coach. On Friday, we learned some new developments that Stenavich was going to be interviewed for offensive coordinator in Denver to possibly follow Hackett there. And then Getsy is actually getting interviewed, or he's been offered the job reportedly as the Bears offensive coordinator. Now, the difference there is Matt LaFleur calls the plays in Green Bay. So even if he's promoted, Getsy was promoted to offensive coordinator, he's not going to be calling plays. That's LaFleur's job. But the Bears, with their hire of head coach, a defensive mind, Getsy, it would be a job upgrade for him, because he would go there to be offensive coordinator and he would call plays, which is typically a step in the job evolution that a lot of offensive coaches make. So at this time that we're speaking, we don't know if that's where he's going to head. But in addition to that, if we're trying to read some tea leaves here, the Packers, this actually just came out before we jumped on here, is that they're blocking Adam Stenavich's interview request with the Broncos, which leads us to believe that he may be next in line to be offensive coordinator here in Green Bay, because when we're comparing those two jobs, it's the same. Hackett's going to call plays in Denver, we assume, so he'd be a non-play calling offensive coordinator there, or a non-play calling offensive coordinator in Green Bay. So that's the difference in situations between him and Luke Getsy. But Getsy is potentially on the move. If Hackett takes over as offensive coordinator, they're going to need to find a new offensive line coach. We still don't know if they're going to move on from Maurice Drayton, their special teams coach. We all saw the 49ers game, obviously, and the miscues there. And, man, those special teams miscues, it wasn't just that game. It's been a season-long battle for the Green Bay Packers. So that's another position change. So a lot of this offseason, rightfully so, is focused on the Packers roster. Who's going to be back? Who's going to be gone? But Matt LaFleur is going to have to do some serious hiring this offseason as well, just to replace several of his coaches. And other than the Maurice Drayton hiring, the special teams coach, and it was only his first year, Matt LaFleur has a pretty good track record of the coaches that he's brought in. Hackett, Getsy, Adam Stenavich, just hired Joe Barry a little over a year ago, or a little less than a year ago now, to be the team's defensive coordinator. And that certainly looks like a move that has the defense going in the right direction. So if Packer fans are looking for something to, something positive that's going to come from this, it's that LaFleur has a good track record. And I also do think it's great if they could keep Adam Stenavich, because this offensive line dealt with so many injuries this year, so much movement. And there's a lot of teams out there that if they had to deal with that, the level of play would have decreased, far greater than what it did for the Green Bay Packers. And of course, helps to have an MVP quarterback back there. But Stenavich has done a great job as the offensive line coach, and certainly deserving of the coordinator promotion if he gets it.
Yeah, sure. And I imagine being a play calling offensive coordinator with a team in the NFL is such an enticing proposition for an offensive coordinator who doesn't have that responsibility, because everybody's trying to advance their careers at the end of the day. And there's only so many lucrative opportunities to do so. You mentioned special teams. I think you wrote something about maybe needing more production from the Packers run game as well at times so far this season. I mean, now that we're removed from the season and coming off that last loss against the 49ers, what are your three sort of big picture takeaways from, could be that game in particular, but really just the season as a whole?
Number one, they need to improve the special teams play. They were able to, for the most part, overcome those miscues during the regular season, although the loss to the Kansas City Chiefs, you can point to that game where special teams played a big role. They lost to Minnesota by a field goal in a game where Mason Crosby missed a field goal attempt. They went to overtime with the Bengals in a game they won, but they shouldn't have, if we're being honest, just because of all the special teams miscues. And with the Vikings game, the Chiefs game that I just referred to, say special teams plays out the correct way. Obviously, it's not a guarantee that they're going to win. But my point is, there were a lot of miscues they were able to overcome. But in the playoffs, it's pretty consistent each season in that your weaknesses are magnified. And those miscues that happen are more difficult to overcome, just the intensity, but also just the level of opponent that you're playing. So that's obviously one of the big things there. And I think, as you had mentioned, the run game article, Green Bay, they were still overall what I'd call effective enough on the ground. But in terms of big plays, so runs of 10 or more yards, they saw a pretty significant decrease in that regard. And it just felt like at times they weren't necessarily able to lean on it as much as I think would have been beneficial for them. And a lot of that goes back to the movement along the offensive line, the injuries that they had to deal with. Without Elton Jenkins, without David Bakhtiari, they're missing Billy Turner, Josh Myers. I mean, Royce Newman, who was a rookie right guard, at one point was the only original week one starter that was still in place, and this was into December. So that obviously played a role in that aspect as well. And then on the defensive side of the ball, I think the run defense is an area that they can continue to improve upon. Green Bay was really good at generating pressure on the quarterback. They were really good at taking advantage of turnover opportunities, but there were a few games in particular against Baltimore, against the Browns, where that run defense was still exposed a little bit at times. And I know Joe Barry's defense, his MO is to take away the pass first, so I don't ever expect this unit to be dominant. But if there's one way that unit, and they showed that they can do it in the NFC in the NFC playoffs against the 49ers. I mean, they did a terrific job at slowing Deebo Samuel, Elijah Mitchell. So if they can get that kind of more consistent performance, I really think that this defense can take a big step next year, because even with all the uncertainty around the roster, the defense is going to have several of their core players. Rashawn Gary, he's under contract. Kenny Clark, Jair Alexander, Eric Stokes. I mean, those are premier positions and some of the better performers at those positions in the entire NFL, that they have a part of that core defense.
And just as a quick follow-up on special teams, any diehard Packers fan who finds this, who's curious about what needs to improve over next season, would say, yeah, no kidding. Of course, the special teams has been brutal and know that already. When you have this recurring problem and you have these disappointing playoff performances that just seem to be coming and coming. I mean, where does the team actually need to start? How do you address the problems that they have with special teams? I mean, is it roster changes? Like you said, is it, more coaching experience? I mean, where do they need to begin?
That's a great question. An old saying goes, you get what you emphasize. And other than a handful of training camp practices that I go to each summer, that's all I see. I'm obviously not there every day or any of the days during the regular season. I don't know what their routine is with the special teams or how much emphasis they're putting into it. But if you get what you emphasize, it certainly doesn't look like there's a whole lot of emphasis on it. In addition to that, and I know there's risk that's involved with it, but maybe towards the latter part of the season, the more important games, playing a few more of the starters out there. Matt LaFleur even mentioned that after the game, that's a big thing that the 49ers did this past Saturday. And then also maybe not relying so much on rookies, first year, second year guys. We know that for a lot of those fringe roster players, special teams is your path to making that 53-man roster. But with youth, with inexperience comes mistakes. And typically the Green Bay Packers, they'll have those back end of the roster guys be special teams players. And oftentimes they're young players as well. So perhaps more of an emphasis. And again, I'm not sure how much they put into it, just going by the results, guessing that could be more, playing more starters and, maybe a few of your free agent additions, not that they're solely just special teams players, but maybe it's someone in year 4 or year 5 who has, 300-400 snaps on special teams under his belt.
Paul, thanks so much for being with us. We appreciate it. We'll follow everything that happens in the offseason with the Packers. And just one more time, can you remind everybody where they can find you?
Yeah, you can find all my work at Dairyland Express and Cheesehead TV. And you can follow me on Twitter at Paul_Bretl. That's Bretl.
All right, Paul Bretl, thanks so much for being with us.
Absolutely.